Welcome, dear listener, to Let's Dig Deeper, the podcast where we talk all about archaeology, history, art, and culture. My name is Zinat Haroun. I am a student of classical archaeology at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, and on this podcast, I'm going to take you along for interviews with some of the delightful people working in the field. And we'll talk with archaeologists, art historians, professionals, and more. Hopefully, we'll learn more about the past in the process. And today is a very special episode. I've traveled all the way from my studio in Copenhagen here to Athens, Greece, and I'm here at the Danish Institute in Athens, or DIA as we say, in a makeshift studio. So if you hear any scooters passing by or the faint background hum of the AC, that's why. And during these special episodes, we'll be talking to some of the most interesting scholars and experts that Athens has to offer. And today I'm joined by none other than Panagiotis Athanasopoulos. Welcome to the studio, Panos.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Athens. Welcome to the Danish Institute.
Thank you. And you are a maritime archaeologist with degrees from Southampton University and the University of Thessaly. And since 2005, you've been a part of the DIA Z Harbor project in Piraeus. And you've also worked on the Agora excavations here in Athens in collaboration with the American School for Classical Studies. And beyond that, you worked on both maritime and terrestrial projects in Greece and abroad. So your research focus is primarily ancient harbors in the Eastern Mediterranean. And you're also interested in this intersection between landscape, ocean, and harbor construction and architecture. So, dear listener, by now it's clear to you that today's topic is maritime archaeology, or underwater archaeology, as you might have commonly heard it referred to. So, Panos, before we really dissect today's topic, let's first talk about maritime archaeology or underwater archaeology as a concept. What are the basic aspects of it, and why did you decide to specialize in it?
Well, maritime archaeology is a discipline of archaeology that focuses on the interaction between people and the water. And by water, I mean either the sea or lakes or a river and the areas in between that. The reason I decided to study first archaeology and then specialize in maritime archaeology was because I loved the sea. And as a kid, I grew up watching those documentaries by Jacques Cousteau, who's a very famous explorer slash diver. And I just happened to have his VCR tapes at home. So as a child, I was watching them and it was very, very fascinating. I loved history in school. So that led me to pursue a degree in archaeology. And from the very, very beginning, I had in mind to end up in what we call maritime archaeology.
So the interaction between humans and the ocean, basically.
And any body of water.
Okay, so now let's dig deeper. So Panos, do you remember your very first dive on an archaeological site? What was that like?
My very first dive as a diver archaeologist, I was still a student doing my bachelor degree, and it was in Piraeus, which is obviously the worst place one can dive for the first time because it's relatively polluted. The visibility is zero. So it's very much not like how people perceive underwater archaeology, at least in our part of the world. So that meant that my first dive was in relatively shallow waters with visibility less than 50 centimeters near a sewage pipe, which was
that
functioning.
Safe?
It was safe because we were taking every necessary measures, meaning that we were using vulcanized rubber dry suits and full face masks. We were decontaminated before and after the dive.
Okay.
We all had our vaccinations. So it was safe. But it wasn't, I mean, I was very excited, but still it wasn't the ideal first time.
You have to start somewhere, I guess.
Yeah. No, it was great fun. And the harder it begins, the more you learn in a way.
That's true. Sometimes you just have to be thrown into it and then learn from there.
I was literally thrown. Yeah.
Thrown in the deep end.
Yeah.
And you worked on both harbors and terrestrial sites on land, but do you approach them with a different mindset? I imagine that there can be a challenge when shifting from land to excavation that are underwater.
In principle, you shouldn't approach them differently. because at the end of the day, we do archaeology. What changes, obviously, is the environment that you do archaeology. So archaeology has some rules, and you try and follow them if you work under the water or near the water. Obviously, doing archaeology in a different environment than the one that we are destined to be as humans, meaning on land, it has some limitations. And one of them is the time, which is a very basic limitation when doing work underwater. And then depending on how exactly the environment is, if it's like a wetland, if it's completely underwater, if it's very deep underwater, that changes the way you approach the day. But the principles should remain exactly the same.
But in practice, there are some differences.
In practice, on the field, when you do maritime or underwater archaeology, every day can be different because there are aspects which also apply for terrestrial archaeology, but we are very much exposed to the weather also when you work in the sea. So you do have a lot of factors that you need to take into account, not even on a daily basis, on an hourly basis sometimes.
Well, that's also the case with some terrestrial excavations as well. I mean, the weather plays a big factor in where you can excavate or when you can excavate or what sort of gear you need to bring for that specific day. So yes, I can imagine that's something that you have to think about.
We do work outside. When you do maritime archaeology, you don't spend the entire day under the water.
No.
So you are exposed to the weather.
That's probably a common misconception, that all you do is dive.
Yeah, that is a misconception, you're right. I mean, there are many misconceptions about maritime or underwater archaeology.
And could you tell us a bit about the Z Harbor project and why Piraeus in particular is so important archaeologically? You said that was your first diving site.
Yeah.
You've worked on it continuously after that as well.
Well, the Z Harbor project began in 2002 or 3 as a very small-scale project at the beginning. After 2004, it grew bigger and bigger. But from the very beginning, it was understood how important the site is. And it was important because it was the harbor, Zea and Munichia, which is the other port of Piraeus, that was housing the Athenian fleet. And the Athenian fleet in Athens at that time, around the 4th century, was one of the biggest powers in the known world. It was such a big power, among other things, because of the navy and because of the power it gained in the sea. Therefore, the harbors themselves, being the house and the very essence of the Athenian democracy, were equally important as site of that period in Athens.
And since Athens, out of all the Greek city-states, was probably the largest and one of the most significant ones, the harbor of Athens is naturally also a big focus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. But if the Athenian navy was what made Athens a superpower, if you could say that in the ancient times, how do the harbors themselves then reflect that story?
Because the harbors of Piraeus, or even the harbors in Corinth, which is the project that we are working now, in my opinion, they encapsulate that power. And especially in the case of Athens and Piraeus, they very much function as the symbolic sort of aspect of the power. Because if the power of a city-state is gained through the sea, then you need the physical existence of something to prove that power. So it's not only about sailing, but you need to have the vessels to prove the power. And then not only you need the vessels, which in the case of Athens, there were at some point more than 300 warships available, but then you also need the buildings to house that huge fleet, and you need the buildings to be visible to the people of Athens, because let's not forget that they were public buildings. They were funded by the state. So the citizens of Athens or of any other city that have contributed to the building of those structures, they needed something to see how their money were spent. So that's the case in Athens, for example. That's why they had like massive shipsheds in Zea and in Munichia to house the triremes, and then those buildings would occupy thousands of square meters, and then they would be seen from almost everywhere, exactly because they needed to have a symbolic aspect.
So there was an aspect of impressing both the local Athenians who had paid for the project, but then maybe also the foreigners who would have visited.
The enemies.
Yes, yeah. to impose on them, this is the power that
exactly. Yeah.
And do we know what daily life in a naval hub like this would have looked like?
It would be noisy to start with, because in the case of Athens, at least, and in Piraeus, you would have almost 50,000 people working in the three harbors. So by definition, it would be a noisy...
Yeah, very loud.
Yeah, busy also, because in the ancient world, you would have a clear distinction between a commercial harbor and a naval harbor, a military one. The commercial harbors would have sort of different buildings around because they were destined for commerce and to exchange goods and ideas. So they would be more accessible. Whereas the naval harbors, the ones destined for warfare and to house the warships, the access to them would be limited. Still, in both cases, you would have a lot of people working inside. When the Athenian fleet would leave the port for a battle, the citizens of Athens would gather down to the port to watch that spectacle.
To send them off.
Exactly, and feel proud of the city and of themselves for being part of that. There is a very nice passage from Aristophanes that he describes the departure of the fleet, and then he describes how the Athenians are gathered down in Zea, and there are like musicians, street musicians, and...
Okay, so it was like a whole party.
Exactly. It's a super cool description of the departure of the fleet. And then you really... It's a text, but you can really, I would even dare to say that you can smell through the text. Yeah, it's very vivid. Fantastic. We call like historical continuity in the use of the specific harbor site, because there is a very good reason to use
that spot. Yeah.
Either it's like well protected or it's convenient to use the waterways opened in front of you. So whoever builds a port somewhere, then the people after him will continue to use the same area as a port. And this is the case in Piraeus. And this was the case in Corinth, in Lecheo, that it was used for like 1,000 years, non-stop, as a port.
The same place.
Yeah, because it was perfect. That's why. So that, when you have like continuous use, when you go there as an archaeologist, you have to go below that, meaning that you have to interfere in the everyday life of whoever is using now. And this is by default demanding and challenging, because first of all, you need to convince the people working now there what you're doing. Then it's a matter of space. Then it's a matter of, like in many cases, like the ones I described, you have modern structures built on top of the ancient structures, because they're just placed perfectly, the ancient structures. So whoever is using the port
will just continue.
They just build on top. So it, again, as I said at the beginning, it takes time. It takes a lot of collaboration. It will take like diplomatic skills to work in a place that somebody else is using now. So that's in terms of the accessibility of the site. And that's as I said, that's an issue with harbors because they're continuously used. It's not like you have an excavation in the middle of the sea on a shipwreck, for example, that there is no traffic.
But for example, the excavations that you have done in Piraeus, what was it like to sort of juggle between this modern life that is still going on and then to actually prioritize the ancient life over that?
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
No.
Really, it wasn't easy, because in order to do any excavation on a port, let's say, you need certain equipment. And the equipment needs to be laid down to wherever somebody else is working, for example. So we needed to sort of arrange space for us. Then you need to regulate traffic inside a modern port. But you can't be diving where a huge yacht will sail out. So, as I said, it needs a lot of collaboration. It needs respect from both sides. I really don't agree with this fake dilemma between archaeology and cultural heritage and development. I don't think this is an issue. We can both very well work together as long as we communicate and each one does its own job.
There's no reason to disagree on it.
No, it's like a false dilemma, as I said.
You mentioned your project in Lycaon, in Corinth.
Yeah.
But you said that's not an active port anymore. So what is sort of the difference between your Piraeus project and then the Lycaon project? Is it easier in Corinth because there are no modern activities going on around it?
In that aspect, it's slightly easier, yeah. But in practical terms, in terms of archaeology and excavation, it wasn't easy because it's more exposed to the weather, because it's like an open beach. So when you have those north winds, you're completely exposed. In Corinth, in Lecheon, the site is very popular for kite surfers.
Okay.
because there's a lot of wind.
Yeah, so it's perfect for them.
For them, it's perfect. For us, when the weather is like that, it's almost impossible because you have like 2 meters of wave
Okay.
in many cases.
Yeah.
And also in that particular project in Lechion in Corinth, you also have like a wetland area, different environment. So you have the water, you have a wetland area, and then you have some terrestrial zone.
What is the aim of the Lechion project? What are you working on there?
We are again excavating and trying to sort out the topography of the ancient harbor of Corinth, one of the two that Corinth had. The bigger one, as it seems, was Lechion. And it's, as I said, it's a port that was used for more than 1,000 years non-stop. Its latest phase being at around the 10th, 12th century AD, and the first phase being on the 12th century BC.
Yeah, so that's pretty far.
Yeah, so you have from almost like Mycenaean times that was sort of first used as a port. Then you had the Greek period, and then you had the Romans, and then you had the Byzantines, and then a bit later. And all of them did different transformations. And again, it's an area that it's more than 500,000 square meters with additions from different periods. And as I said, that extent because this was an artificial port, meaning that they dug out.
So not like Piraeus, that was more natural.
Exactly,
form.
exactly. Yeah. Piraeus was a very naturally landlocked, protected bay, both harbors. In the case of Corinth, they completely transformed the area, and they did that, again, as I said before, because it was geographically very convenient for them to have a port there for two reasons. One, because it was very close to ancient Corinth. It was only like 2.5 kilometers away.
Yeah.
So access was very easy. And the other was that the port of Lechio is towards what we call the Corinthian Gulf, which gave them access to the west. And by west at that time was Italy, the Ionian Sea, and then Italy, the Adriatic Sea. So for the Corinthians having one port in the Saronic Gulf, after they were controlling the isthmus anyway, then they needed something to control the other side. And it was a perfect combo for them. That's why they made a port in an area that you wouldn't do it otherwise because it's quite exposed to the weather. But they chose the place and then they dug out an inner harbor, more protected, and made all the facilities that you see even today.
And since the project spans such a wide time period, how do you narrow it down? Does the project have a specific periodical focus, or are you just learning about the whole history of it?
We are trying to learn about the whole, decipher the entire period of use of the port.
That sounds like a lot to
It is a
catalog.
lot. Yeah, it is a lot. There's still a lot of work to be done, to be honest. There's still a lot of interesting things to be excavated and presented to the public. But it's a lovely site. It's a fantastic port, very important, equally important to Piraeus, the Athenian ports.
And now I'll do the other side of that long question.
Please, yes.
So we've talked a bit about the different limitations and opportunities in maritime archaeology. But if money and resources and time wasn't a limit, what kind of technology would you dream of using in your field?
Well, technology has progressed a lot. Now, I know this is a cliche to say, but the tools that we have nowadays are almost unlimited to do anything. So that's my first comment. The other comment is that I don't really want to narrow it down to one tool that I would love to use in maritime archaeology. I would love to be able to use all the technological tools that were, in my opinion at least, built or constructed or envisioned by public universities for free. Because whatever we use in terms of technology in underwater archaeology is very expensive to use.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But this is knowledge that came in a way from us. So I want archaeology, which is, I would dare to say, one of the most public
facing industries.
Yeah. We need to be able to use those tools for the benefit of, not us, for the benefit of the public.
So perhaps just actually getting access to the tools that are already
exactly.
available.
Yeah. You have all the tools you can imagine, even submarines that can take 5 people inside and go down to unlimited depths almost. This is very expensive.
And we've talked about clearing up some of the common misconceptions. And one of the most prominent ones that I think you may encounter is that underwater archaeology can be a bit dangerous at times. There are certain risks associated with working underwater. And have you ever had a dive go wrong or faced unexpected challenges in the middle of field work or anything like that?
Underwater archaeology shouldn't be dangerous. And you should follow certain safety rules. And if you do, that means that 99% you and your diving partner and your colleagues will all be safe. However, if you don't follow those specific rules, like in any job, things can get a bit dangerous. Also, we don't dive for fun. Recreational diving is one thing, it's fantastic, it's very fascinating, but we work underwater, meaning we do, as I said, like scientific diving, let's call it as it's called. And that means that on one hand, you have the rules that apply for safe diving, for working in a different environment than the one that we're destined to be. And then there should be another set of rules for the work itself. So as you can have any kind of accident when working on a construction site, the same could apply underwater. So you need to take into account those things. If you do, then most of the times you're safe. In my case, I never had any major issues. A couple of broken fingers.
That's still an
not
issue.
just one for me, but I've seen other colleagues also having that. Those are the things, because again, you carry a lot of equipment, you deal with stones, very large ones sometimes. Yeah. There might be failure of equipment if you don't treat them well, as it happens on land.
If you don't follow the rules.
Exactly. So I don't remember any, and I'm very happy about it. Nothing unsafe in any of my projects.
Okay, that's pretty
except
good.
minor scratches and wounds.
And a broken finger or something.
And a broken finger.
Okay, well, that's good. That's why I asked, because I believe it's sort of this misconception of it as a sort of, like Indiana Jones scenario where it's just like the Wild West underwater, but it's actually very scientific work. It's structured, it's organized, there are guidelines that you have to follow. So these very outrageous worst case scenarios, they rarely happen, as I understand.
They should rarely happen. Yeah, exactly. We're not, Indiana Jones is a very fascinating figure. I loved it.
Me too.
But then, no, when you go to work, you just go to work. You have to be as professional as possible. Speaking about misconceptions.
Yes.
And also, you don't have to run around the jungle like Indiana Jones. You don't have to shoot anybody.
No.
And so,
or be shot at.
No, definitely not. So yeah, in reality, it's a very, very serious task. And it needs to be serious so that you're safe. Because it's not, obviously, we're not filming
It's not just
a
for
movie.
fun.
Yeah, it's not, no, I mean, there is fun, as much fun, maybe a bit more than any other job. But still, in order to have fun, you need to be safe.
That's true.
Jumping, for example, from tree to tree into a jungle is not a safe practice.
No, that's not the archaeological way. And something I've always wondered personally is when you're working underwater as an archaeologist, I mean, like you said, there's a difference from working on land, but on land, we also have issues with things like wildlife and animals that are in the area that we're working in. And is this also something that presents itself in the work that you do as a maritime archaeologist? I mean, do you literally swim with the fishes, or how does that work?
The fish are in their own environment.
We're the ones
We're the ones, sort of, the intruders. But yeah, you see that the life, whatever life is left in the Mediterranean Sea, to be honest.
There's not much left?
Compared to some years ago, I think it's declining. That's my experience.
Is that something that you've actually noticed yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's shocking because we're talking about like 20 years difference. And I can tell that the fish population is
Decreased.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
It is. And I don't see how it will get better anytime soon. But let's see.
Yeah.
However, yes, you do coexist with the natural habitats of the water. I mean, obviously, in the Mediterranean Sea, the dangers of wildlife are limited compared
Out in the
the
open
Pacific Ocean. Yeah.
Okay, so what's one of the most memorable moments that you've had working underwater on a project? Is there maybe one artifact or one structure that has stayed with you?
That's a very tough question to ask an archaeologist.
Yeah.
I think the most rewarding thing is the connection you develop with a site that you're excavating. And after you excavate in a place for some seasons or even for one season, but it's a very intense excavation season, then when you leave the site, regardless of the finds, regardless if you find, I don't know, gold treasure, for example, which is another
Have you found gold
misconception.
treasure ever?
No, golden coins, yeah, but the treasure, no. But again, it's a misconception that we find like tons
Buried
of gold.
treasure and stuff like that.
That's not the case.
Oh.
So when you leave a site, to me, it feels sometimes, because of the intensity of work and how you connect to the place, it's like you leave your home. And this is the most rewarding feeling at the end of every excavation season, is like the more homey I feel after I leave a site, that means the better it has been for me and for the team and for the project in general. And I've said in many lectures that for us archaeologists, we don't have one like country, one home. We have many, because with most of the places that we work, we develop a certain sort of attachment that sort of carries on forever in a way.
So yeah, kind of lives on with you.
Yeah, it does. Now, in terms of finds, to answer a bit more specifically, I can't forget when we first discovered remains of wood, of timber in Lecheo, and day by day we were sort of understanding how massive the wooden remains are. That made all of us super excited and realizing that this is something very, very unique for the Mediterranean standards at least, and for a port structure as well. So I would say one is that. But then I would be very unfair to all other sites, because really in every site there is something that you get out of a dive, or you end your excavation day and then you nod and you say, that was a good day, or that was a good dive, or that was a fantastic pottery fragment.
So there's something from everywhere.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I would say so.
That's probably actually the better answer. That means that it's actually been good all throughout your career.
I can't complain.
There are some of my friends back in Denmark that are curious about how to pursue a career in underwater archaeology. So what's one piece of advice for students with an interest in the field? Is there something that you wish that you had known at the beginning of your own career?
Well, for your friends in Denmark that they want to pursue a career in maritime archaeology, after listening to your podcast, I hope they clear out the misconceptions. So if they think that they will be with a swimsuit all day long, that's not going to be true. The other thing that I would sort of advise them is to see if they like archaeology and try and work in excavations anywhere on land, underwater, whatever they can get their hands on, to see if they enjoy that, because that's the life of an archaeologist. The other thing I would advise them is to find the many amazing maritime archaeologists that are nowadays everywhere, a lot, and they are the ones that I have worked with and met. They are all fantastic, very experienced, very broad-minded, and talk to them. And then again, on a more personal note, I would also advise them to have a plan B and C.
Just in case.
Just in case, because archaeology is not easy and very uncertain, obviously. That's what I would advise them. But if they could study that, archaeology, and then sort of specialize in maritime archaeology, I would definitely advise them to do so, because the entire course of studies is very rewarding. They will learn a lot of things. They will have a fantastic time. They will meet a lot of people from many different places of the world. And this is always an asset, whatever you do in your life.
And finally, the really fun question that I've been saving to the end. People often connect sunken cities with Atlantis, and I don't think I can finish this episode without at least bringing up Atlantis once. That would be a disservice to all my listeners. So when you tell people that you're an underwater archaeologist, how often do you get asked about Atlantis, and what's your favorite answer?
Yes, another misconception. I do get asked a lot about Atlantis. Most of the times I don't know what to reply exactly. It's not that I disregard questions like that, or I really understand where they're coming from.
The curiosity of it.
Yeah. I'm just like honestly telling them that this is probably like a myth.
So you burst their bubble, basically.
I do burst their bubble, but I'm trying to burst bubbles in archaeology in general, with hidden treasures and unlimited gold somewhere hidden beneath us or in the sea. And Atlantis is another myth that I am trying. I love bubbles, and I love, as I said at the beginning again, I love a good story.
Yeah.
Even if it's not true, even if it's a huge lie, if it has like a beginning, a middle part, and an end, I love a good story. So I'm even willing to slightly debate about that.
Okay, so just to be clear, your professional opinion is that Atlantis does not exist.
That goes without saying, yes.
No. What will they think?
There are a lot of sunken settlements or harbors or small cities or whatever that worth to be discovered. And if they're presented the right way, they can look like Atlantis.
Yeah. So we'll just have to make it work with what we
we just need to make more projects to fund those projects and
rename a new site Atlantis.
go and find amazing things that they're out there, definitely.
Great. I love that answer. Okay. Well, Panos, I think we've reached the end of this episode. Before I let you go, let's do a quick summary of what we've talked about. What's one key takeaway that you want our listeners to remember about maritime archaeology?
On a serious note, that it's a discipline of archaeology. So we do archaeology. It's not just the diving. It's archaeology, and we follow those guidelines.
Amazing. Panos, I think we've learned so much about maritime archaeology, and it's time that we get our fins and goggles and go explore what the ancients left behind for us under the sea level. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for coming to Athens, and thank you for that podcast and that interview. It was fantastic.
And thank you, dear listener, for tuning in to this episode of Let's Dig Deeper. I hope you've learned lots. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, you can reach us at letsdigdeeperpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is letsdigdeeperpodcast@gmail.com. or on Instagram @letsdigdeeperpodcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. I'm Zinat Haroun, and I've been your host. You can reach me on Instagram @z_archaeology. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time, where we will dig deeper into another topic. Bye!